911, what's your emergency?
They're stuck! Oh my God! We can't!
What was supposed to be an adventure just turned into a life or death crisis. After the exhausting uphill climb, the students finally reached the mouth of Ellison's cave, unaware they'd already passed the point of no return. The group split up temporarily. One team disappeared into the winding horizontal tunnels, their lights swallowed by darkness. The other gathered anxiously around the edge of the warm-up pit, readying ropes for their descent into the unknown. At the pit's edge stood 20-year-old Grant Lockenbach. Grant was fearless, an ROTC-trained athlete who pushed every limit. Marathons, skydiving, rock climbing, nothing seemed to faze him. But Grant's confidence sometimes turned reckless, and inside this unforgiving cave, one mistake could carry dire consequences. Beside him was 18-year-old Michael Peary, quieter but no less brave. Yet despite their courage, the group was dangerously unprepared. No thermal clothing for freezing water, no helmets, limited lights, and worst of all, no way to call for help if something went wrong. They stood excited at the edge of darkness, completely unaware of how quickly their adventure would turn to disaster. The warm-up pit's name is grimly ironic because it actually had an ice-cold waterfall opposite to its ledge. As Grant stood at the edge of the warm-up pit, ropes in hand, adrenaline pumping through his veins, a backpack suddenly slipped from a fellow student's grasp. The group watched helplessly as it tumbled downward, vanishing into the darkness. Grant made a decision without hesitation. He volunteered to rappel into the pit to retrieve it. In the blink of an eye, excitement shifted to tension, and what had begun as a promising adventure would soon spiral irreversibly out of control. His friends peered over the edge, anxiously following the narrow beam of his headlamp as it cut through the darkness and glistened off the damp rock walls. As Grant descended deeper, he crossed paths with the downpour from the waterfall. The air temperature inside the cave hovered around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, but the waterfall cascading into the pit was barely above freezing. Within moments, Grant felt icy droplets seeping into his clothes. Approaching the pit's bottom, he realized too late that he had made a crucial misjudgment. The rope he'd rigged was positioned directly in the waterfall's path, rather than off to the side, where dry anchors were usually placed. As he entered the waterfall of freezing water, the force of it knocked him off balance, disorienting him completely. His headlamp beams scattered chaotically through the falling water as the freezing torrent pressed against his body. Suddenly, Grant found himself twisting and spinning uncontrollably, trying desperately to regain control. Above, the students heard his panicked shouts, the frantic tone clear despite being muffled by rushing water.
"Grant?"
Michael shouted anxiously from above.
"Grant, are you okay?"
The reply came back faintly, fragmented and desperate, his voice barely audible over the waterfall's relentless roar. Michael's stomach tightened painfully at his friend's words. He moved to the edge, gripping the cold rock wall, peering helplessly into the abyss. His mind raced. He had never faced a situation remotely like this, but he couldn't bear the thought of standing idle while Grant suffered. Others in the group exchanged worried glances. They lacked the gear, the knowledge, and the confidence to mount a proper rescue. Michael felt the weight of indecision pressing heavily, the seconds passing like hours. Michael sprung into action. He knew the decision was risky, even reckless, but he couldn't leave Grant alone down there, trapped beneath that freezing waterfall, slowly losing his grip on consciousness. Ignoring warnings from friends around him, Michael strapped up. Before going down, he tells the group,
"Can you pray for me?"
he asked softly.
"Because, honestly, I have no idea what I'm doing."
Michael steps over the ledge, gripping the rope tightly. He descended quickly, too quickly, his inexperience clear in every shaky movement. Within seconds, he too became enveloped in darkness, battered by the same icy waterfall that held Grant captive. The brutal cold shocked him immediately, the breath forced painfully from his lungs by the torrent. As Michael struggled downward, confusion overtook him. Visibility was almost zero, the icy water stinging his eyes and numbing his fingers, making it nearly impossible to keep control. He could barely make out Grant's shape suspended below, tangled hopelessly in his own ropes. He shouted desperately to reassure his friend.
Grant! Hold on! I'm coming!
But in that very instant, Michael felt a sharp, violent jerk. His rope twisted around Grant's line, tangling them together. Now, both friends hung side by side, trapped in the relentless, freezing waterfall. Above, the rest of the group could no longer see clearly into the pit below. The waterfall's deafening noise had completely drowned out the boys' voices. Helplessness and dread seized everyone on the ledge. They frantically called down, hoping for a response, but none came.
We need help. We need to get out now and call 911.
In a frenzy, several students begin heading back toward the cave entrance, sprinting over the slippery rocks and treacherous paths they'd casually navigated earlier. Panic propelled them upward toward daylight and cell reception. Meanwhile, Grant and Michael hung trapped beneath the freezing torrent, their bodies rapidly succumbing to the effects of hypothermia. Their muscles grew weaker, thoughts foggy and disoriented, breaths shallow and erratic. Grant's initial cries had weakened to faint murmurs, barely audible even to Michael, just feet away. Both young men, suspended together, were now lost in the bitter cold and pitch-black darkness of the pit. Above ground, the students burst from the cave's entrance, gasping for air and fumbling for their phones.
911, what's your emergency?
They're stuck. They're trapped. 2 of our friends are trapped in the cave in a waterfall. Please hurry. We can't reach them.
Okay, stay on the line.
The dispatcher said firmly.
Help is on the way.
But inside Ellison's cave, every minute felt like eternity. Grant and Michael hung suspended beneath the freezing waterfall, ropes twisted and hopelessly tangled. They've been suspended in the cold for 30 minutes. Both hypothermia and suspension syndrome have kicked in. At the mountain's base, a team of professional cave rescuers assembled rapidly. Among them were veteran cavers Anmar Mirza, Tim White, and Bill Putnam. They knew Ellison's reputation and understood immediately what they faced. 2 students trapped deep inside, critically exposed, time quickly slipping away. By the time they enter the cave, it's been over an hour since Grant and Michael have been suspended under the waterfall. Arriving at the pit's edge, they called down sharply, hoping desperately for a response.
Grant, Michael, can you hear us?
Only silence returned, a silence made deafening by the endless roar of icy water. The rescuers exchanged grim looks. Without a word, Mirza clipped into his rope, carefully rappelling into the darkness, navigating around the waterfall as best he could. The beam from his headlamp caught 2 shapes suspended below. Grant's head tilted upward, unmoving. Michael's helmet dangling uselessly beneath him, limbs slack. His heart sank. He reached out desperately, straining against the ropes to swing closer, but he couldn't reach them from his position. They hung motionless in the freezing cascade, bodies pale and still, lost to the bitter cold and relentless darkness of Ellison's cave. Rescuers Tim White and Bill Putnam descended into the pit directly through the icy torrent, their bodies battered by the frigid cascade. Fighting fatigue, urgency, and the numbing cold, they finally reached Grant and Michael, hoping desperately that somehow they were still alive. But the hope quickly faded. The extraction of Grant and Michael took multiple hours, When they finally emerged from the cave entrance, a heavy silence fell over everyone gathered. By nightfall, the tragic news had spread across the University of Florida campus. Shock and grief consumed the Fellowship of Christian Athletes community. Classes paused and students gathered to mourn, struggling to comprehend the sudden loss of two friends. Today, their names remain etched not only into the walls of Ellison's cave, but also into caving history itself, a stark reminder of how quickly one misstep can change everything.